I think I didn't do anything wrong. That's what I keep telling myself as I stare at these divorce papers scattered across my desk at the marketing firm where I've worked for 6 years. Just let the night go a little too far, that's all. But here I am, getting served legal documents over what Simon calls a tiny birthday mistake. The process server had walked right into our open concept office, past the motivational posters and ergonomic chairs, asking loudly for Mrs. Rebecca Martinez. Every head turned. My co-workers pretended to focus on their computer screens, but I could feel their eyes burning into me as I signed for the manila envelope that would destroy my life. Emergency custody hearing, the papers read. Irreconcilable differences due to emotional infidelity and abandonment of marital duties. Simon's overreacting. He always does this, makes mountains out of molehills. So what if I had a little fun at my birthday dinner? So what if I talked to Kellen a bit too much? We've been married 8 years. Doesn't that count for something? But as I sit here in my grey cubicle, surrounded by campaign mock-ups for laundry detergent and breakfast cereal, I can't shake the memory of that night 3 weeks ago. The way Kellen's hand brushed mine when he passed me the wine. The way Simon's face went pale when he saw us laughing together. The way everything started falling apart so quickly after that. Maybe I should start from the beginning. Maybe if I tell this story right, you'll understand that I'm not the villain here. I'm just a woman who made some small mistakes, and everyone around me decided to blow them completely out of proportion. So, please, stick with me through this. Like this story if you can relate. Comment below if you've ever been misunderstood, and subscribe if you want to hear how this all plays out. Because trust me, you won't believe where this goes. It all started with my 32nd birthday dinner at Marcello's, that upscale Italian place downtown, with the dim lighting and overpriced wine. I should have known something was wrong when Simon suggested we invite Kellen. The restaurant buzzed with the usual Friday night energy, couples leaning across candlelit tables, the clink of wine glasses, the soft murmur of conversations mixing with gentle jazz music. Our table sat 8 people, me and Simon, my sister Lauren, and her husband Dave, our friends Helen and Marcus, and then there was Kellen with his date Sarah, some blonde real estate agent he'd been seeing for a month. I'd known Kellen since college. We'd dated briefly junior year, nothing serious, just a few months of late-night study sessions that turned into something more. When we broke up, it was mutual, no drama, no hard feelings. We'd stayed friends through the years, even after I married Simon. He'd been to our wedding, sent Christmas cards, liked our photos on social media. Normal stuff. But that night felt different from the moment he walked in, wearing that navy blazer that brought out his eyes. He hugged me a little too long for a birthday greeting, his cologne mixing with the restaurant's garlic and wine scents. "Happy birthday, Becca," he whispered in my ear, and I felt something flutter in my stomach that I hadn't felt in years. Simon noticed immediately. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way he gripped his beer bottle just a little too hard, but he didn't say anything. Simon never says anything in the moment. He stores it all up like ammunition for later. The dinner started innocently enough. We ordered appetizers, shared stories about work and kids and weekend plans. Lauren was telling everyone about Dave's latest home improvement disaster when Kellen leaned over to pour wine into my glass. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly, meant just for me. I felt my cheeks flush. "Thank you. Sarah seems nice." "She's fine," he shrugged, glancing at his date who was deep in conversation with Helen about mortgage rates. "Not really my type, though." I should have changed the subject. Should have turned back to the group conversation. Instead, I found myself asking, "What is your type these days?" His eyes met mine across the flickering candle. "I think you know." That's when I felt Simon's hand on my shoulder, firm and possessive. "Becca, can you help me flag down the waiter?" The evening continued with this undercurrent of tension. Every time Kellen made me laugh, and he was always funny, that's what I'd loved about him in college. I could feel Simon withdrawing further. When Kellen complimented my dress, Simon's knuckles went white around his fork. When our hands accidentally touched reaching for the breadbasket, Simon excused himself to the bathroom and stayed gone for 10 minutes. "You need to be careful," Lauren whispered to me while the men were arguing over the check. "Careful of what? We're just talking." "You're flirting, Becca, and everyone can see it." But I wasn't flirting. Not really. I was just being friendly, enjoying the attention, feeling attractive and interesting for the first time in months. Is that such a crime? The real drama started when the bill came. Simon reached for it immediately, but Kellen intercepted. "Let me get this," Kellen said. "It's her birthday." "I can pay for my wife's birthday dinner," Simon replied, his voice tight. "I'm sure you can. I'm just offering." "We don't need your charity." The table went quiet. Sarah looked embarrassed. Helen stared at her dessert plate. Marcus cleared his throat and suggested we split it evenly, but the damage was done. Under the table, I felt Kellen's foot brush against mine. Instead of pulling away, I let it stay there. Just for a moment, just because it felt nice to be wanted. Simon saw. Somehow, he always sees everything. The ride home was silent except for the radio playing soft rock hits from the 90s. Simon gripped the steering wheel like he was trying to strangle it, staring straight ahead at the empty suburban streets lined with identical houses and perfect lawns. "Did you have fun tonight?" he finally asked, as we pulled into our driveway. "It was nice. Good food." "That's all." I knew what he was really asking, but I played dumb. "What do you mean?" "Nothing, Becca, just forget it." That night, for the first time in 8 years of marriage, Simon slept on the couch. I woke up Saturday morning to find Simon making coffee in the kitchen, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled shirt. Our daughter Emma, 7 years old with my dark hair, and Simon's serious brown eyes, sat at the breakfast table eating cereal and swinging her legs. "Why did Daddy sleep on the couch?" she asked me innocently. Simon's back stiffened at the coffee maker. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he was gripping the counter. "Daddy was watching a late movie," I lied smoothly. Sometimes grown-ups fall asleep watching TV. Emma seemed satisfied with this explanation and went back to her Lucky Charms, but Simon turned around, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Disappointment, deep, bone-weary disappointment. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Not now." I nodded toward Emma. "Later then, when she goes to her sleepover at Madison's." The day dragged on with this cloud hanging over us. Simon barely spoke, except to answer Emma's questions about her sleepover plans. I tried to act normal, doing laundry and cleaning the kitchen, but I kept catching him watching me with that same disappointed expression. Around 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Kellen. "Thanks for a great evening. Hope we can do it again soon." I should have deleted it, should have blocked his number. Instead, I found myself typing back, "Me too. It was fun." "Your husband didn't seem to think so." "Simon's just tired from work. He'll get over it." "Want to grab coffee sometime this week? Just as friends, of course." I stared at the message for a long time. Coffee was harmless, right? Just two old friends catching up. Nothing wrong with that. "Sure, Tuesday afternoon." "Perfect. I'll text you the details." I deleted the conversation and slipped my phone back into my pocket, but when I looked up, Simon was standing in the doorway. "Who was that?" "Just Lauren, about Emma's birthday party next month." Another lie. They were getting easier. That evening, after we dropped Emma at her friend's house, Simon and I sat in our living room like strangers. The house felt too quiet without Emma's chatter and cartoon shows. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "I found something today," Simon said finally, pulling out a small notebook I'd never seen before. "What is that?" "I've been keeping track of things." He opened it and began reading in a flat, emotionless voice. March 15th. Becca mentioned Kellen would be at the Morrisons' party. Seemed excited about it. March 22nd. Came home 20 minutes late from grocery shopping. Said there was a long line, but receipt shows transaction at 3:47, not 4:30 like she claimed. April 2nd, phone buzzed during dinner. She said it was work, but smiled when she read it. My blood ran cold. You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention to my wife. There's a difference. Simon, this is crazy. You're acting paranoid. Am I? Because last night at dinner, I watched you flirt with your ex-boyfriend right in front of me, right in front of our friends, and now you're lying about who texted you. I wasn't flirting. You let him touch your foot under the table, Becca. I saw it. The room spun slightly. How could he have seen that? We were sitting across from each other. It was an accident. Was it? Because from where I was sitting, it looked pretty intentional. I felt trapped, cornered. The smart thing would have been to apologize, to promise it wouldn't happen again, to work on rebuilding trust. Instead, I got defensive. You know what? Maybe if you paid half as much attention to me as you do to that stupid notebook, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for conversation. The words hung in the air like poison. Simon's face went pale, then red, then settled into something cold and determined. So you admit it. You are looking elsewhere. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. He closed the notebook and stood up. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, and tomorrow we're going to my parents' house for Sunday lunch. We're going to sit there and pretend everything's fine, and then we're going to figure out what we're doing about this marriage. He walked upstairs without another word, leaving me alone in our living room with its family photos and wedding pictures and all the remnants of a life that was suddenly crumbling around me. Sunday lunch at Simon's parents' house was torture. Margaret Martinez had set the dining room table with her good china, the kind with tiny roses around the edges that she'd inherited from her mother. The smell of pot roast and fresh bread should have been comforting, but instead it made my stomach churn with anxiety. Simon's father, Robert, carved the meat in careful, precise slices while making small talk about the weather and his golf game. Margaret bustled around serving vegetables and refilling water glasses, but I could feel her eyes on me, studying, judging. Helen was there too with Marcus, which should have been my first warning. Helen and I had been friends since Emma was born. We'd met in new mom classes and bonded over sleepless nights and diaper disasters. But today she barely looked at me. So, Becca, Margaret said as she passed the mashed potatoes, Helen tells me you had quite the birthday celebration Friday night. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. It was nice. Good food. She mentioned you had some interesting company. Simon continued eating methodically, not meeting my eyes. This was a setup. They'd all talked about this before I arrived. Just friends from college, I said carefully. Including Kellen Morrison. Margaret's voice was sweet as honey, but there was steel underneath. Yes, he was there with his girlfriend. His girlfriend. Helen finally spoke, her tone flat. Funny, because she spent most of the evening talking to Marcus about real estate, while you and Kellen were having your own private conversation. We were just catching up. Is that what you call it? Margaret set down her serving spoon with a sharp clink, because from what I heard, it looked more like a reunion. The room went silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Simon still wouldn't look at me. I don't appreciate being ambushed, I said, my voice shaking slightly. And I don't appreciate watching my son's wife make a fool of him in public, Margaret shot back. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for our family? Nothing happened. Yet, Helen added quietly. Nothing happened yet. I turned to Simon, desperate. Are you going to let them attack me like this? Finally, he looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. Are they wrong, Becca? Yes, God, yes, they're wrong. I had dinner with friends. I talked to people. I'm sorry if that's a crime in this family. It's not about talking to people, Simon said quietly. It's about the way you talked to him, the way you looked at him, the way you've been lying to me. I haven't been lying. Simon pulled out his phone and set it on the table. Then explain this. On the screen was a screenshot of a text conversation. My text conversation with Kellen from yesterday. You went through my phone. You left it on the counter. It buzzed. I saw his name. The messages were there in black and white. His invitation for coffee, my acceptance, our casual dismissal of Simon's feelings. Reading them now, surrounded by his family's disappointed faces, they looked so much worse than they had felt in the moment. Coffee, I said weakly. It was just coffee. With your ex-boyfriend, that you didn't tell me about, after lying about who texted you. Margaret made a disgusted sound. In my day, married women didn't have coffee dates with their ex-boyfriends. It's not a date. Then why didn't you mention it to Simon? Robert asked quietly. He'd been silent through most of the confrontation, but now his gentle question hit harder than all of Margaret's accusations. I didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, I had an answer, but it wasn't one I could say out loud. I hadn't told Simon because I knew he wouldn't like it. I knew it would hurt him. I knew it was crossing a line. I want you to cancel it, Simon said. What? The coffee date. Cancel it. I'm not going to let you control who I can and can't see. Even if seeing him is destroying our marriage. The question hung in the air like smoke. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for my answer. The smart thing, the right thing, would have been to say yes, to cancel the coffee, block Kellen's number, focus on fixing what was broken between Simon and me. Instead, I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to sit here and be treated like a criminal because I have friends. Becca, please, Simon started. No, I'm done. Emma and I will be at home when you decide to stop letting your family run your marriage. I grabbed my purse and walked out, leaving them all sitting there in shocked silence. It wasn't until I was in my car, driving home through the quiet suburban streets, that I realized what I'd just done. I'd chosen Kellen over Simon, and everyone at that table knew it. Tuesday afternoon found me sitting in a corner booth at Cafe Luna, a trendy little place downtown with exposed brick walls and the kind of coffee that costs $8 a cup. I'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on a blue dress that I knew brought out my eyes. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, I told myself, just because I wanted to feel confident. Kellen arrived 10 minutes late, looking apologetic and handsome in his business casual attire. He worked in finance now, something involving investment portfolios and quarterly reports that sounded both boring and impressive. Sorry, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Client meeting ran long. It's fine, I just got here myself. That was a lie. I'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, checking my phone and watching the door like a teenager waiting for prom date. We ordered our overpriced coffee and fell into easy conversation. He told me about his work, his apartment downtown, his recent trip to Colorado. I found myself talking about things I hadn't discussed with anyone in years. My college dreams of becoming a photographer, my frustration with the marketing job that paid the bills but killed my soul, my feeling that life was passing me by in a blur of school pickups and grocery shopping and suburban routine. You were always creative, Kellen said, stirring sugar into his latte. Remember that photography class we took together? You had such an eye for capturing moments. That was a long time ago. Not that long. You're only 32. There's still time to chase those dreams. It was exactly what I needed to hear. When was the last time Simon had encouraged my dreams? When was the last time he'd even asked about them? Simon thinks photography is a hobby, I found myself saying. Something to do when Emma's at school and the laundry's finished. What do you think? The question was simple, but it hit me like a revelation. What did I think? When had I stopped asking myself that question? I think I miss feeling passionate about something. Kellen reached across the table and covered my hand with his. You deserve to feel passionate, Becca, about your work, your life, everything. His touch sent electricity through me. I should have pulled my hand away, but I didn't. It felt too good to be touched with intention, with desire, with something other than the absent-minded affection of a tired husband. Things aren't great at home, I admitted. I could tell at dinner. Simon seemed pretty tense. He's been different lately. Suspicious, controlling. He went through my phone, can you believe that? Like I'm some kind of criminal. That's not okay, Becca. You deserve better than that. We talked for 2 hours, about marriage and dreams and the paths not taken. When it was time to leave, Kellen walked me to my car in the parking garage. The afternoon light filtered through the concrete structure, casting long shadows between the cars. I'm glad we did this, he said, standing closer than necessary. Me too. Maybe we could do it again, soon. I knew I should say no, knew I should go home and have an honest conversation with Simon about our problems. Instead, I heard myself saying, I'd like that. He leaned down and kissed my cheek, but his lips lingered a moment too long, straying dangerously close to the corner of my mouth. I'll call you, he whispered. I drove home in a daze, my cheek still tingling from his kiss. The house was empty when I arrived. Simon was at work, Emma at after-school care. I had an hour before I needed to pick her up, an hour to think about what had just happened. Instead of thinking, I found myself looking in the mirror, seeing myself through Kellen's eyes. When had Simon last told me I was beautiful? When had he last really looked at me, not just glanced up from his phone, or his work, or his constant worry about bills and schedules? My phone buzzed. A text from Kellen. Thank you for a perfect afternoon. You're even more amazing than I remembered. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Thank you for listening. I needed that more than you know. Anytime. You can talk to me about anything, Becca. I'm here for you. When Simon came home that evening, I was making dinner and humming softly to myself. I felt lighter somehow, more alive than I had in months. You seem happy, he observed, loosening his tie. Just had a good day. What did you do? The lie came easily. Ran errands, picked up Emma, the usual. He nodded and went upstairs to change clothes. I continued cooking, pushing away the small voice in my head that whispered I was crossing lines I couldn't uncross. That night, as Simon and I lay in bed reading our respective books, my phone buzzed with another text from Kellen. Simon glanced over, but I quickly turned the phone face down. Who was that? Probably just spam. Another lie. They were getting easier every day. 3 weeks into my secret friendship with Kellen, everything exploded on a Thursday evening that started like any other. Simon was in his home office paying bills. Emma was upstairs doing homework, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when my phone rang. It was Lauren, my sister, and she sounded upset. Becca, we need to talk. What's wrong? Helen called me. She's worried about you. My stomach dropped. Worried about what? She saw you today, at that cafe downtown, with Kellen. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. It was just coffee. Just coffee. Becca, she said he kissed you in the parking garage. On the cheek. It was just a friendly goodbye. A friendly goodbye that lasted long enough for Helen to take pictures. The world tilted sideways. She took pictures. She was there with a client, saw you through the window. She thought maybe she was wrong, maybe it was someone who looked like you. But then she saw you in the parking garage and... Lauren's voice trailed off. And what? And she realized her best friend was having an affair. I'm not having an affair. Then what would you call it? Secret meetings, lying to your husband, letting another man kiss you? I wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't what it looked like, but the words stuck in my throat. Because deep down, I knew Loren was right. I knew what I was doing, even if I couldn't admit it to myself. It's complicated, I said finally. No, it's not. It's actually very simple. You're married to Simon, you have a daughter, and you're throwing it all away for what? Some fantasy about your college boyfriend. You don't understand. Simon and I, we're not happy anymore. So you work on it. You go to counseling. You talk to each other. You figure it out. You don't run off with your ex-boyfriend. I'm not running off with anyone. Aren't you? Because Helen said you looked pretty cozy for two people who are just friends. I hung up on her. Actually hung up on my own sister, rather than listen to more truth I wasn't ready to hear. But I couldn't hang up on the reality of the situation. Helen had pictures. She'd seen Kellen kiss me, seen us holding hands across the table, seen the way I'd looked at him like he was my salvation instead of my destruction. I was still standing in the kitchen, staring at my silent phone, when Simon appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay? You look upset." This was my chance, my opportunity to come clean, to tell him about Kellen and the coffee dates and the growing feelings I couldn't seem to control. To ask for help, for forgiveness, for a way back from the edge I was dancing on. Instead, I lied again. "Just sister drama. You know how Lauren gets." Simon nodded and started to turn away, but then stopped. "Becca, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy? With us, I mean. With our marriage?" The question caught me off guard. There was something vulnerable in his voice, something that reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. "Why would you ask that?" "Because lately, it feels like you're somewhere else. Even when you're right here, you're not really here." This was it. This was the moment to tell him everything, to fight for us, to choose my marriage over this dangerous game I was playing. "I'm just tired," I said. "Work stress, you know." The light in his eyes dimmed slightly. "Right, work stress." He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "Helen called me today." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "She wanted to know if we were free for dinner this weekend. Her and Marcus, us. I told her I'd check with you, but..." He turned back to face me. She sounded strange, like she wanted to tell me something but couldn't. Strange how? Like she felt sorry for me. The words hung between us like a loaded gun. Simon was giving me one last chance to tell him the truth, and we both knew it. "I can't imagine why," I said. Something shifted in his expression. The vulnerability disappeared, replaced by a hardness I'd never seen before. "Neither can I," he said quietly, "but I have a feeling I'm about to find out." He walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the weight of all my lies pressing down on me like a physical thing. My phone buzzed with a text from Kellen. "Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. When can I see you again?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the keyboard. This was the moment of choice. I could delete the text, block his number, and try to salvage my marriage. Or I could keep walking down this path that felt so much easier than facing the problems at home. I typed back, "Tomorrow, same time, same place." His response was immediate. "Can't wait." I deleted the conversation and went upstairs to help Emma with her homework, pretending I couldn't feel the foundation of my life cracking beneath my feet. The divorce papers in my hands were thorough and devastating. Simon hadn't just filed for divorce, he'd built a case. Phone records showing dozens of texts between Kellen and me. Credit card statements proving I'd lied about my whereabouts. Witness statements from Helen, from the barista at Cafe Luna, from neighbors who'd seen Kellen's car in our driveway the afternoon I'd invited him over while Simon was at work. That afternoon had been a mistake. Emma was at a sleepover, Simon was working late, and I'd been feeling lonely and sorry for myself. When Kellen suggested coming over to see some of my old photography work, it had seemed harmless enough. But it wasn't harmless. We'd sat on my couch looking through photo albums, drinking wine, talking about the past and the future, and everything wrong with my marriage. When he'd leaned over to kiss me, really kiss me this time, not just a peck on the cheek, I hadn't stopped him. We didn't sleep together. I need to be clear about that. But we came close. Close enough that when Simon came home early and found us on the couch, disheveled and guilty, there was no explaining it away. The fight that followed was nuclear. 8 years of marriage, of partnership, of building a life together, and it all came down to Simon screaming at me in our living room while Kellen slunk out the back door like the coward he was. "How long?" Simon had demanded. "It's not what you think." "How long?" "We never slept together." "That's not what I asked." I couldn't answer him, couldn't tell him about the weeks of secret meetings, the emotional intimacy that had grown between Kellen and me while my marriage withered from neglect. Couldn't explain that I'd fallen in love with feeling wanted again. "Get out," Simon had said finally, his voice deadly calm. "Pack a bag and get out. I don't want you here when Emma comes home tomorrow." "Simon, please. We can work this out." "No, we can't, because I don't know who you are anymore." Now, sitting in the lawyer's office 3 days later, I was beginning to understand the full scope of what I'd lost. The papers detailed Simon's request for primary custody of Emma, with supervised visitation for me until I completed counseling. He wanted the house, the car, most of our assets. He was claiming emotional abandonment, infidelity, and something called alienation of affection. "Is this legal?" I asked my hastily hired attorney, a tired-looking woman named Patricia who specialized in messy divorces. "Unfortunately, yes. Your husband has been very thorough. He has documentation going back months showing a pattern of deception and emotional infidelity." "But I never actually cheated. Not physically." Patricia looked at me over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Martinez, emotional infidelity can be just as damaging to a marriage as physical infidelity, sometimes more so. And the evidence here is pretty damning." She spread out printed screenshots of text messages between Kellen and me. Messages I'd thought were deleted. Conversations I'd thought were private. Simon had somehow recovered all of it. "How did he get these?" "Your phone was on the family plan. He had legal access to the records." I read through the messages with growing horror. Taken together, they painted a picture of a woman who'd checked out of her marriage emotionally, who'd been building an intimate relationship with another man while lying to her husband daily. "I need to call Kellen," I said suddenly. "He'll testify that nothing physical happened." Patricia's expression was grim. "I'm afraid Mr. Morrison won't be helping your case." "What do you mean?" She pulled out another document. "He's provided an affidavit to your husband's attorney. He states that while you didn't engage in physical relations, you repeatedly expressed dissatisfaction with your marriage and indicated you were considering leaving your husband." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "He's lying." "Is he?" "Because, according to this affidavit, you told him on multiple occasions that you felt trapped in your marriage, that you'd married too young, that you wondered what your life would have been like if you'd made different choices." I had said those things. In moments of weakness, of self-pity, I'd confided in Kellen about my doubts and regrets. I'd never meant them as declarations of intent to leave Simon, but reading them now in legal language, they sounded like exactly that. "There's more," Patricia continued. "Your husband has recordings." "Recordings of what?" "Phone conversations between you and Mr. Morrison. Apparently your husband installed recording software on your phone after he became suspicious." "That's illegal." "Actually, in this state, it's legal to record conversations if one party consents. Since it was his phone plan and you were using a device registered to him, he had the legal right." She played one of the recordings on her laptop. My own voice filled the small office, talking to Kellen about how lonely I felt, how Simon and I barely talked anymore, how I sometimes wondered if I'd be happier divorced. Hearing myself say those words, I realized how they must have sounded to Simon, like his wife planning her escape, using another man as her emotional support system while she figured out how to leave him. "The custody hearing is next week," Patricia said. "I have to be honest with you, this doesn't look good. Your husband has painted a picture of a mother who was so focused on her affair that she neglected her responsibilities to her family. That's not true, isn't it? Because according to these phone records, you were texting with Mr. Morrison during your daughter's school play, during parent-teacher conferences, during family dinners." Each accusation was like a punch to the gut because each one was true. I had been distracted, absent, living more in my fantasy world with Kellen than in reality with my family. What are my options? Patricia closed the file. Accept his terms and hope for generous visitation rights, or fight it and risk losing even more. I walked out of that office in a daze, finally understanding the full cost of what I'd done. I hadn't just betrayed Simon, I'd betrayed Emma, betrayed myself, betrayed the life we'd built together. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. I sat next to Patricia at a wooden table that had seen better days, watching Simon across the aisle with his attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who looked like she ate cheating wives for breakfast. Emma wasn't there, thank God. She was staying with Simon's parents, probably wondering why Mommy and Daddy were fighting so much, why I'd been sleeping at Aunt Lauren's house for the past 2 weeks. Judge Harrison was a stern-faced woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every kind of family drama imaginable. She reviewed the evidence with the detached efficiency of someone who'd stopped being surprised by human behavior long ago. "Mrs. Martinez," she said, looking at me over her reading glasses, "I've reviewed the documentation provided by both parties. Do you dispute the evidence of your relationship with Mr. Morrison?" My mouth was dry as sand. "Your Honor, I never physically cheated on my husband." "But you don't dispute the emotional relationship?" I glanced at Patricia, who nodded slightly. "No, Your Honor, I don't dispute that." "And you don't dispute that you concealed this relationship from your husband for approximately 2 months?" "No, Your Honor." Judge Harrison made a note in her file. "Mr. Martinez, you're seeking primary custody of the minor child based on claims of emotional abandonment and infidelity. Can you elaborate on how this affected your daughter?" Simon's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Mrs. Martinez was frequently distracted during family activities, missed several important school events due to her meetings with Mr. Morrison, and created an unstable home environment through her deceptive behavior. Mrs. Martinez, how do you respond to these allegations?" I stood on shaking legs. "Your Honor, I love my daughter more than anything. I made mistakes in my marriage, but I never neglected Emma." "Yet according to these phone records, you were engaged in lengthy text conversations with Mr. Morrison during your daughter's soccer games, school performances, and family dinners." The evidence was overwhelming. Every text, every call, every lie was laid out in black and white. I could see the disappointment in Judge Harrison's eyes as she reviewed the timeline of my deception. "I'm also troubled by this recording," she continued, pressing play on a device at her bench. My voice filled the courtroom. "Sometimes I think Emma would be better off if Simon and I just got divorced. All this fighting and tension can't be good for her." I'd said that to Kellen during one of our coffee dates, frustrated after a particularly bad morning with Simon. Hearing it now, in this sterile courtroom, it sounded like I was prioritizing my own happiness over my daughter's stability. "Mrs. Martinez, did you make that statement?" "Yes, Your Honor, but it was taken out of context. I was just venting. You never meant to suggest that divorce would be better for your daughter than working on your marriage." I had no answer for that, because in that moment, caught up in my fantasy with Kellen, that's exactly what I'd meant. The judge made her ruling after reviewing all the evidence. Simon was granted primary custody, with me getting supervised visitation every other weekend until I completed counseling and could demonstrate stability. He got the house, the car, and most of our assets. I was ordered to pay child support and split the cost of Emma's therapy to help her cope with the divorce. As the gavel came down, I felt the last pieces of my old life crumble away. Simon didn't look at me as he left the courtroom with his attorney, already making plans for his new life as a single father. I sat there long after everyone else had gone, staring at the empty judge's bench and trying to figure out how I'd gotten here. 6 months ago, I'd been a wife and mother with a normal suburban life. Now I was a weekend visitor in my own daughter's life, living in my sister's guest room and working with a court-appointed therapist to figure out why I'd destroyed everything I claimed to love. The answer, when it finally came to me, was both simple and devastating. I'd been so focused on what I thought I was missing that I'd forgotten to appreciate what I had. But by the time I realized that, it was too late to matter. 3 months later, I was sitting in Dr. Chen's office for my weekly therapy session, talking through the wreckage of my choices. Emma was adjusting well to the new arrangement, according to the custody evaluator. She was thriving in Simon's stable environment, making friends at her new school, participating in activities I'd been too distracted to notice she'd wanted to try. "Have you had any contact with Mr. Morrison since the divorce?" Dr. Chen asked. "He called a few times right after the court hearing, wanted to see if I was okay." And I realized he didn't actually care about me. He cared about the excitement, the drama, the thrill of being wanted by a married woman. When I was actually available, suddenly he wasn't interested anymore. It had been a crushing realization. The man I'd thought I was in love with, the man I'd destroyed my marriage for, had disappeared the moment things got complicated. He'd found a new girlfriend within weeks of my divorce being finalized, posting happy couple photos on social media while I was fighting for the right to see my own daughter unsupervised. "What have you learned from this experience?" Dr. Chen asked. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I learned that honesty isn't just about telling the truth. It's about being honest with yourself about what you really want, what you're really doing, and what the consequences might be. "And what do you want now?" "I want to be the mother Emma deserves. I want to rebuild some kind of relationship with Simon based on respect and co-parenting, and I want to figure out who I am when I'm not lying to everyone, including myself." It wasn't a happy ending. There was no reconciliation, no dramatic gesture that won back my family. Simon had moved on, was dating a teacher from Emma's school who seemed kind and stable, and everything I hadn't been. Emma called her Miss Sarah and talked about their weekend adventures with an enthusiasm that broke my heart. But it was an honest ending. And after months of lies and deception and self-delusion, honesty was all I had left. The last time I saw Simon was at Emma's school play, 6 months after our divorce was finalized. She was playing a tree in the environmental awareness production, standing perfectly still with her arms stretched out like branches, while other kids danced around her as woodland creatures. During intermission, Simon and I found ourselves standing together by the refreshment table, making awkward small talk about Emma's performance. "She's doing really well," I said. "She is. She's resilient. Like her father." Simon looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time since that terrible night when he'd found Kellen and me on our couch. "I hope you're getting what you need from the therapy," he said quietly. "I am. I'm learning a lot about myself. Not all of it good, but necessary." He nodded. "Good. Emma needs her mother to be healthy. Simon, I know this doesn't change anything, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for the affair, but for all of it. For checking out of our marriage, for lying, for putting you through hell. I know you are. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" He was quiet for a long time, watching Emma through the auditorium doors as she got back into position for the second act. "I'm working on it," he said finally. "For Emma's sake and for mine. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Becca. And it doesn't mean going back." "I understand." The lights dimmed, signaling the end of intermission. As we walked back to our seats, sitting separately now, with his girlfriend Sarah between him and the aisle, I realized this was probably the most honest conversation Simon and I had ever had. It had taken destroying our marriage to learn how to tell each other the truth. Emma finished her performance beautifully, standing perfectly still as her classmates took their bows around her. When she spotted me in the audience, she waved with one branch arm, and I waved back, grateful for this moment of pure joy in the midst of all the wreckage I'd created. After the show, as I watched Simon and Sarah congratulate Emma with flowers and hugs, I understood that this was my new reality. I was no longer the center of my daughter's world, no longer part of the family unit I'd taken for granted for so many years. But I was still Emma's mother, still had a role to play in her life, even if it was smaller than before. And maybe, if I kept working on myself, kept being honest, kept showing up when I was supposed to, that role could grow into something meaningful again. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I'd earned through my choices. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, that felt like enough.